Our next video today, we're going to do something really special. We're going to actually get to meet and introduce Brian in his really nice older Class C, and you'll get to know him, and because you're going to be seeing a lot of him on the channel, so that's a good thing. Welcome, Brian. You've been on before, but welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we've had a lot of people in the videos that I have done. A lot of people have asked, what do I live in? A tour of my rig, a tour of my setup, and so we thought it'd be a great idea to give you guys a gander of what is going on in my rig, and also get a little bit. I can tell you guys a little bit about myself. So.
And I think Brian and I present a really good balance because, I'm kind of the live in a van, live in something small, and you're living in an RV and have been for a while.
It's like a mansion, right?
It's a mansion, yeah. So, I think it's a good balance. Brian's a little younger, I'm a little older, and I just think it's a really, really good balance. So, let's go back to the beginning, like we always do in these interviews.
Yeah.
And how did you end up living on the road?
So I was living in Denver, Colorado, and it just years before I'd seen stuff about the tiny house movement, and I was just fascinated by that. I thought it was so cool environmentally. And then about 2009-ish, I was living in Denver, and I just started getting really bored with my life. I was thinking I might have to do what I'm doing now for 30 years, and I would like no changes in sight. And so I just kind of had inspiration to look at like the tiny houses and things like that. Once I started looking into that, I was like, well, an RV is just a tiny house on wheels, and I didn't have a location I wanted to be, and so I just kind of became enamored with maybe getting on the road. And a girl I was dating at the time, we both wanted to do that, and so I bought an RV and fixed it up and hit the road.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that story. The idea, I can remember when I was younger, much younger, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, thinking, I'm going to do this for 30 more years.
Yeah.
And then I remember thinking, I'm going to do this for 20 more years. And then by the time I was saying, I'm going to be doing this for 10 more years, I was at the end.
You'd had enough, right?
That was it. I was done. I wanted something else.
Yep, absolutely.
And so this is, of course, I was forced into it, but. And so you just started doing your research and found out about this way of life?
I did. And I honestly, at the time, this was 2009, I didn't know there were a lot of other people doing it. And granted, the numbers were lower then, but there were still plenty of people doing it. I just wasn't aware of them. I thought I was unique, and it turns out not as unique as I thought.
Well, in 2009, you were pretty unique.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I just kind of did a little more research back then. I didn't really have a lot of websites to choose from. I came across yours and also the Yahoo groups, the Van Dwellers. A lot of information was put forth on that. You answered some of my questions, you and another gentleman. So it was very, very helpful, and it made the transition onto the road much, much easier.
And you also were in Colorado. Yep. And you were doing a lot of things out in nature. You were doing a lot of backpacking, things like that?
Yeah, a lot of car camping, a lot of backpacking, mountain biking, so a lot of outdoor stuff. And that's the other thing that pushed me into the vehicular nomadic lifestyle, is that I love being outside. And I was in the city near downtown, and it was fine, but I really had a desire to be out in nature more and more and more. And so that made it very easy to make that transition because I was already into the outdoors.
And one of the things you will have seen already, and you're going to see going forward, is that Brian will do a lot more adventure things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not all that adventurous. I'm older. It's just not as easy for me. And so that's an element that I think has been missing from the channel. That here's an opportunity to go out and do things, and Brian's going to be the doer of the deeds.
Yeah, I mean, my job is to go out and have fun in nature. This is the dream, so yeah, I'm looking very much forward to that.
Now have been living the dream. Now you're living the dreamer's dream.
There we go. So, and recording it. So yeah, there'll be proof.
Yeah, proof. And so you've been in the same exact rig this whole time.
I have, and I found over the years that that's kind of unusual. A lot of people try their first rig, then they'll go on to something else, the 2.0, the 3.0. No, I've been in the same thing for 12 years, and I like it. It really works for me. I started off without a tow-behind car for the first 6 months, and then getting a job up as a campground host with you, I figured I needed a second car. So I had a little white Ford Festiva, and that worked great for 6 years or so. But then I started feeling a little limited on where I could go because the car had low clearance. The motorhome can't get as far or deep into the woods as I wanted. And so I gave the Festiva away, and then I got the little Geo Tracker, and that has opened the doors a ton to all the places I can go now. So that's been very, very exciting for me. I've had the Geo now for 5 years, almost 5 years. But yeah, the system works for me. I don't know if I'll be in it forever, but I love my home. It's very comfortable for me. I'm used to it. I've built it out how I want it. Things I've changed, I'm happy with. And so the idea of going to something else and having to go through all those pains again, a little daunting.
Right.
I like keeping the home constant, but the areas I go to changing.
Tiny home,
Hmm.
enormous backyard.
There we go. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
that
Yeah.
changes all the time.
Yeah.
Every 14 days,
Hmm.
you're some or less. I'm
Yeah.
sure, often less. And you've worked for the same company, for the same company as
Hmm.
a campground host ever since then too.
Yeah, so I had 12 seasons with, they were called California Land Management. They just merged with another company. Now they're called Vista Recreation, I believe. But they were great. I had an incredible time working for them as a campground host. And with that money that I made during those summers, I was able to not work most of the winter. And so it became a very sustainable lifestyle that I can make a little bit more than I spend each year. And I can live pretty frugally in this. And by doing that, I don't have to worry about, not making enough money. So, and I'll always have a roof over my head.
Right. That's what I love most about this life. You'll
Yeah.
never be homeless,
No, absolutely.
and you can always find food.
Hmm.
But if you're never homeless, then you're okay.
Yeah.
To my mind, that's exactly how I think.
Yep. I have shelter, so I'm good.
Yeah. Folks, we're going to do a tour here in right after this video, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Brian's rig. And so you have a fairly old RV.
I do. It's a 1977 Class C motorhome, and so when I first went looking for motorhomes or whatever, at that point I wasn't really thinking about a van because there was going to be two of us. That never actually came to fruition, but again, we were planning for that, and so I was looking at Class A's, but they were huge. I love the front window, but it was just way too large. But I was really wanting something from the 80s or 90s. I didn't want anything in the 70s. I thought that was too old. Uh, but after test driving 5 or 6 different motorhomes, this one was built the best. It was cared for the best. I didn't love that it was carbureted versus fuel injection, but when I test drove it, I was just amazed at how solid the vehicle was, how well cared for, and it had orange shag carpet. And that was a little reminiscent of my childhood, I have to say. And that was kind of a selling point. So it was just this orange, ugly shag carpet, but for some reason I loved it. And that was something that I was drawn to.
And it served you really well.
It has.
Your intuition was right.
It was, and I did have to do some repairs. I've actually had to replace the engine and do some other kind of engine work on it. But altogether, I paid $3,300 for it, put on solar, did some other things. I've kept track of all my finances or my expenses over the years for the motorhome, and I think I'm right around 11 or 12,000 total for the vehicle, which would put it at less than $1,000 a year for me to have my vehicle. That doesn't include gas, but it includes all maintenance, oil changes, changes I've done to the interior, things like that, and the engine.
By putting a brand new engine in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was expensive. That was $4,500. So
Yeah. So that's really phenomenal. You really got a really wonderful rig there.
yeah, I did. And the person I bought it from, he had actually bought something, I think in the 80s or 90s, and he was a little reticent about getting rid of this one because he said the newer ones were not built as well as the old one. There are other features, obviously, with the newer rig, but he was a little, and maybe he just had nostalgia for the rig. He'd had it for 20 years or so, but it was. I just had a really good feeling from the owner. They were extremely nice, very forthcoming on everything. He was a mechanic, and it felt very, very good.
And what year is this?
1977.
So it's a 77, which is, very old. It's
Yeah,
very old now.
yeah.
And you are, while you're not really a mechanic,
Mm-mm.
you have maintained the outside, the rig itself, really carefully.
I have, I'm not a mechanic, but I've definitely learned to do a lot of mechanical things over the years by necessity. The nice thing about having an older rig is that the engine is simpler to work on. The systems in general are easier to work on. They're not as complicated. But then obviously you have the outside maintenance of the resealing the roof and things like that. But again, that's a small price to pay because you're going to have to do that with any vehicle. Anytime you poke a hole in your roof, you're going to have to do the sealant and things like that. And I know you're supposed to check it every year. I usually do it every 2 or 3 years, quite honestly. But yeah, I've become intimately aware of the mechanics and the inner workings of my motorhome, which is another nice thing about being in the same rig for 12 years is that I know everything there is to know about it. Whereas if you have a new system, a new vehicle, you have to relearn those things.
And there's just no question in my mind at all that a newer RV is not going to be the quality of yours. It's not going to last 40, 50 years.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because this is now 45 years old. And, a lot of people I know, they've had ones that were either brand new or within the last 10 years, and they're kind of falling apart, And so I don't know if the manufacturing of RVs is getting just, if they need to step it up a little bit, I think.
I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So, and I think they've gotten that input, and I think a lot of people are complaining. And so I think they are receiving that input. Hopefully they'll do something about that.
Right. Yeah, because oddly, you might be better off with either a very old rig or one that you hope is a better quality.
Yeah.
So, and you got to understand with a very old rig, you're going to put money into it, although you have not had to. That's just really amazing.
Yeah. Again, because the systems are more simplified, you don't have as many crazy things going on. I still have the original refrigerator in there.
Hard to believe.
But that's because it does run off of 120 if you're plugged into shore power, but it doesn't run off of 12 volt. You don't need any battery usage on it because there's no monitors, things like that. It's just a on pilot, and it's always going, And so there's very little technology in there. There's no motherboard, there's no circuitry, anything like that. Very simple.
And that's what if with the new fridges, I think that's what's constantly going out on them is just a board, and then you can't replace the board.
Yeah, for sure.
And so with absolutely no electronics, there's just not much to break.
Exactly, absolutely. So, and that's definitely been a positive to having an older rig. Just less things that can go wrong.
Right.
And at this point, the things that have gone wrong, I've replaced, and it's not been a big deal.
So you know what? I'd like to really hear from all of you. What do you think of buying a 45-year-old RV? I mean, we know their advantages, the simplicity, they're easier to fix. You're still finding parts okay.
I am. Because it's a GMC. It's very, very common parts. So that's been a blessing.
So what do you think? Buy new, buy old, buy in between? What is your thought? I'd really love to hear it. And what has been in your experience? Have you bought old and it was junk, or have you bought new and it was junk? What's been your experience with buying different age of vans and RVs or whatever it is that you're in? Now come right back. Right after you see this video, we'll do the tour. We'll go around, look inside, and see some of that orange shag carpet. I'm looking forward to that. And so if you got anything out of this video, like us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up button, and we'll talk to you later. Bye now.
So long.